Ivan Jim, the General Secretary of NUMSA, is on the line for me. He's called this morning. Good morning to you, Mr. Jim.
Good morning, Polani. Good morning to listeners.
Thank you. Thank you for calling.
No, just a contribution.
Yeah.
I just think indeed the professor or the gentleman you have there who has been accused of being superficial and not getting deeper to problems, I do want to allege that indeed he is superficial in his analysis. I think we should pull back, all of us as a country, and appreciate that we are in 18 years in a democracy. And part of what we did, you would remember that during the apartheid era, if a worker were to be dismissed at work, workers would immediately tool down. And workers during the apartheid era used to be at work during the day. They used to be chasing police at night. Managers used to be at work during the day, but they used to be in the hippos during the night, arresting the very same workers. And what happened was that we went into a process of negotiations. That's where basically we got a raw deal. Because what we did there, instead of changing the structure of South African economy fundamentally, we set up institutions and structures that promoted class harmony in a class-divided society. And as such, indeed, we have demobilized, we have CCMAs of this world. If a worker is dismissed, it's a lengthy process, and so forth. And I'm raising the issue. Part of what COSATU did in the past 18 years consistently has been to tell everybody that, listen, as a country, we've got an apartheid wage gap that continues. As a country, we've got the structure of South African economy that benefit a tiny minority. You know, people think that when we say there's a triple crisis of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities, they think that we're smiling when we say that. We mean that, Polani, there is somebody who have no plate of food. We mean that there are families who can only share poverty in a particular community. We mean that when the rain falls, those communities get wiped away, and everybody sees that happening every day.
Yeah.
But what have those who own the structure of South African economy, those who get co-opted to defend the status quo have done? They have done nothing. And all what now people must do, just yesterday, before there was Marikana, we had everybody in this country, the academia, the intelligentsia, the right-wing priest and neoliberalist, taking the public space, telling the whole country that the dangerous thing we have in this country is trade unions. They continue to bargain for workers. And trade unions, by then, they were simply saying, raising only two things. They were saying, hey, ban labor brokers, give workers proper job, do away with neoliberalism, because the vast majority of people who don't work in this country, they depended on those few who have got jobs. And we're saying that that situation is crumbling.
Sure.
And now, nobody's willing to take responsibility. The problems is unions, workers must, there's something wrong with them, they are violent. How come these workers be so violent only when they're in the street, but they grew up, their families, they take everybody on board? If it is not the system that has failed them.
All right, but let's talk a little bit about the militancy. And I know that NUMSA has openly said that, you know, it's a militant union. It's known as a militant union. Do you get a sense that more and more workers in this country are going to be radicalized in a sense?
Well, my honest view is that unless we have people both at the level of government and at the level of capital who appreciate that we cannot have apartheid structure of the economy in a new dispensation. It doesn't matter what systems you try to put in place. Inequalities in this country are basically got out of hand. And the truth of the matter is that we must make sure that black and white in this country have got equal access to the economy. We must make sure that there are jobs. We must make sure that workers are paid a living wage. And unless we deal with those issues, NUMSA, you're right. As a union, we have never said that militant is equal to violence. Militance has to do with workers being organized, united, acting in disciplined fashion. If they say that workers say we're on strike, they pull their labor and so forth. That includes educating society to back our strike without any form of violence. But the truth of the matter, I must say, the bulk majority of workers now have been carrying this particular burden.
All right, Ivan Jim, NUMSA General Secretary, calling us at this time. Let me just read one or two SMSs as we head towards the end of the program here this morning. Somebody says, this violence is historical. Remember the days of the boycotts. If you went with us, you were against us. Solidarity, ANC, Vuga, Libone in Pinelands. Another one, it's no wonder workers go crazy. The big bosses have no idea how their workers have to live. Shame on them, living lavishly on the back of cheap labor. Joe says, we are heading for a revolution which might result in the current government overthrown. There's also somebody who says Eddie predicted the storming of the Bastille. It is a reality, and only way to avoid this is to create work. I want to be on our show to address this time bomb, says an SMS not signed. Velesaz in Johannesburg says, when will be the right time to allocate blame to the current regime for the collapse in education, health and general misrule? Dimane says, not surprising, capitalism is in crisis. Violence brings more violence. Welcome to militant chaos. Africans killing each other. Some things don't change, says an SMS not signed. There's a culture of greed and self-enrichment amongst our leaders and the very rich, which is fueling a culture of violence amongst frustrated workers, also says an SMS. Quickly, let's go to Prophet OJ in Mahikeng as our last caller. Good morning to you, Prophet.
Good morning, Kolani, and how are you and your panelists? I love them. I'm saved by the blood of God, Jesus Christ. Kolani, the Bible in the book of Proverbs 28, verse 19, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. My worry has always, since I'm a citizen of South Africa, my worry has always been that it is like we are failing as a nation to establish a system which will directly speak into the standing policy on a living wage, on pricing of items, on investment policy, on economic transparency. What is worrying here? It is that people on the ground, they were expecting by now that at least even a person in the rural area will be able to know that, look, in South Africa, when we talk living age, we are saying 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
When we talk pricing or transparency of the economy, we are saying this. Why can't we just have people in South Africa meeting around the table, debating? It shouldn't be somebody standing there and saying nationalization, somebody standing there saying this, somebody standing there saying this. This is angering people every day.
Okay, Prophet, I've really got to go back to my guest now, get the closing statements here, perhaps starting with Gavin Brown, your closing remarks.
Kolani, I'd just like to comment on Irwin Jim's thing. First of all, I mean, he's a leader of one of the most militant and leftist trade unions in COSATU. So, I mean, his comments aren't surprising. But I've heard a lot about politics and very little about collective bargaining. And certainly no suggestions as any way to do anything different. I think, in closing, I'd just like to say we mustn't look on this violence as a particularly South African phenomenon. Trade unions and strikes all over the world are accompanied by violence at some or other level. It's just the nature of the beast. I think many other countries are more successful than us in managing it and controlling it and preventing it. But what we've seen in the last few weeks is a total breakdown of that system. And that's what we've got to address first. I don't think if we went to a truck driver on the N1 at the moment and asked him what a neoliberal was, that he would have the faintest idea. That gives you an idea of the gap between the leadership and the members.
All right, Professor Maluleke, your closing remarks, but also just tell me something. Just having heard this program today, having heard what people have got to say, where are we as South Africa in these matters?
Kolani, I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think COSATU has a lot of work to assist its member unions in the rebuilding of relationship between them and their members. I think that is a very, very important task because I fear that there is an erosion of that dynamic relationship between workers and the trade unions, and especially the leadership of the trade unions. It doesn't help that the political elite and the BEE elite go about flaunting how rich they are in the context where you have gaps of some worker getting 6,000 rands a month and a boss getting 800,000 rands a month. These things have got to be addressed, Kolani, going forward, because if we don't, we really are running into a very serious problem. I'm worried about the way we talk about the workers. I mean, the way we talk about them as the people who are violent, as the people who do not know. There was even suggestions that in Marikana they were under the spell